Every day there's members of the Fort Worth Police Department that make me proud to be a part of the team, that remind me why I do what I do, and that show such professionalism and service to our community that I feel with pride. Today is no different. Now, obviously, we're here to give an update on the triple homicide, and nothing we say here will take away from the tragedy of this crime. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the family members and loved ones affected by this tragedy. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the first responders who showed up on scene that day and the investigators who investigated this. It's not something anyone should ever have to see, but they did their job and they did it well. Our thoughts and prayers also go out to this whole city of Fort Worth. I believe our collective hearts broke when we heard about this story. This was shocking, it's unsettling, and we knew bringing someone to justice in this case was paramount. Now I'm going to let Sergeant Loafman answer questions specific about this case, but I have to tell you how proud I am of our homicide unit, what they were able to accomplish in less than a week with a very difficult case, one that easily could have become a cold case if not for their diligent efforts. When I think about what they do, it fills me with pride but not surprise. It's indicative of the work they do every single day. Absolute top-notch police work, and I couldn't be more proud. To tell you more about the details of the case, I'm going to ask Sergeant Joe Loafman to come up and provide a statement. Sergeant?
My name is Joe Loafman, Sergeant of the Homicide Unit. I'm just going to read from my bullet points. On September 21st, 2021, Fort Worth Fire was dispatched to the 3100 block of Bonnie Drive at 6:17 a.m. in reference to a dumpster fire. Once the fire was extinguished, the fire department personnel located dismembered body parts inside of the dumpster. Homicide unit detectives and digital forensic unit detectives responded to the scene in an attempt to retrieve video surveillance evidence. Video surveillance evidence helped us to identify a possible suspect vehicle. We believe that vehicle to be a 2005 to 2010 Jeep Grand Cherokee. In the following hours, we were able to identify the male victim, David Luares, Hispanic male, 1029 of 78, based on tattoos that were very distinct. Detectives then got to the job of investigating who the perpetrator of this crime was. We requested a list of all Jeep Grand Cherokees 2005 to 2010 in Dallas and Tarrant County. That list was over 7,000 vehicles. While reviewing the list, a familiar name to our office came up, a gentleman named Jason Thornburg. He showed to be a registered owner of a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Mr. Thornburg's information is familiar to us because of a suspicious death investigation from May of 2021 in the 4500 block of Valentine on Fort Worth, report number 2100-38605. At the time of this investigation, we did not have probable cause to make an arrest in that case. Detectives were able to locate Mr. Thornburg's Grand Cherokee based on information that we were able to obtain at a residence in Arlington. We sent detectives out to that location to surveil that unit, or surveil that Jeep. We also were able to locate where Mr. Thornburg was sleeping at night, which was a motel, the Mid-Cities Inn in Euless, Texas, off of Highway 10. Detectives went to that location and were able to obtain video surveillance evidence that on the night of the fire and dumping of the bodies, depicted a resident of the motel exiting a room carrying plastic bins with what we believe to be body parts of our victims. That subject made multiple trips to and from that location to add additional items to the back of his car. The time frame involved in those trips would coincide with the time it would take to leave from Euless, Texas and get to the offense location in Fort Worth on Bonnie Drive. Yesterday afternoon, approximately 5:30 p.m., we observed Jason Thornburg exiting a residence in Arlington where we were surveilling his vehicle. 3 of my detectives approached Mr. Thornburg and asked him to speak with them. He agreed to come with us voluntarily to our office to speak with us. We also had the assistance of the criminal tracking unit out in Arlington, and that was just for safety purposes, but they provided great assistance with us to help us to be able to surveil this unit while it was in Arlington. Once back at our office, Mr. Thornburg participated in a consensual interview with my detectives, during which time Mr. Thornburg admitted his involvement in the death of the 3 individuals that were recovered in the dumpster on Bonnie Drive. Mr. Thornburg went into intimate details as to how he committed his crime, which, as all of y'all know, I can't provide those details because this is an ongoing investigation. Once the details were learned in reference to this most recent offense, we went back to the May offense on Valentine, and we were able to get Mr. Thornburg to admit to that being a homicide as well. He provided information that only someone that was involved in the offense would be able to provide to us. Mr. Thornburg then went on to admit to us that he had killed another female in another state. We have been in contact with local law enforcement in that state, and I won't be speaking as to any of the details of that. I will let them speak on that subject at their own time. A warrant was secured for the motel room in Euless, and crime scene personnel went to the location, and that search continues at this time. Not really at liberty to share any details as to what we may or may not have found at that location. That information will come out at a later time. Homicide detectives then, after the interview with Mr. Thornburg, he was released from our custody and taken to Euless, Texas, where he requested to be taken. Detective Matt Barron prepared a capital murder warrant for Mr. Thornburg's arrest. It was signed into effect, and it was assigned a $1 million bond. Shortly after the arrest warrant was signed, members of the North Texas Fugitive Task Force, along with the Fort Worth Police Department Fugitive Unit, took Mr. Thornburg into custody in Euless, Texas without incident. Mr. Thornburg was then taken to the Tarrant County Jail, where he was booked in on the above mentioned warrant, and that's where he remains today. Fort Worth homicide detectives believe that we have identified the 2 additional victims. We believe both of those victims to be adult females. Initially, we believed that one of the victims was a child, just based on the evidence that we located in the dumpster. I can't really go into any more detail than that. Positive identification will be made by the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office on their time. We won't be confirming any identification. We have provided the names and identities that we believe the victims are. I'm sorry. This is an ongoing investigation. I will provide y'all as much detail as I can, but just understand that there are a lot of things that I cannot say just because it will compromise our investigation. On a personal note, I'd like to thank the following people: the men and women of the Fort Worth Police Department Homicide Unit, the Digital Forensic Unit, the Criminal Tracking Unit, Fort Worth Police, U.S. Marshals, North Texas Fugitive Task Force, and Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office, as well as Fort Worth Fire Department Arson, for all of their work. This could not have come to a conclusion in such a rapid pace without the collaboration with all persons involved. And I'll take any questions that y'all have.
Sergeant, can you comment on what the motive might have been and how he came into contact with the 3 victims found in the dumpster?
No, Scott, I'm sorry, I can't.
Can you at least give us the states of the other investigations as far as?
The one that's internal in our office, we will be filing charges in reference to that. Like I said, he gave intimate information that only somebody that was involved in the crime could know. And as far as the other one, I honestly don't know the status of that. We have been in contact with them last night and this morning. I would assume that they're going to be traveling here to take up their investigation.
Did he say if he knew the victims?
Yes, ma'am. David Luaris had been living in the same room with him for at least a few days. As far as the females, he did not say whether he knew them. He only knew them casually based on the conversations that we had.
What day did you identify him as a possible suspect based on the vehicle records?
Yesterday, at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Can you comment on why maybe you didn't feel it was necessary to put out the details of this murder in the days initially after it happened?
Well, we have certain investigative tactics that we use, and we were running with those before we felt it necessary to make it public. In the grand scheme of things, I believe that we put this out much more quickly than we have in the past, and quite honestly, it's simply because we believed we had a child. My detectives are really good at what they do, and the public's help is very helpful a majority of the time, but sometimes it leads you down rabbit holes that you just can't get out of. And in this instance, we felt that it would be more productive for us to go about it our own way. And that was only for about 36 hours before we put something out.
With the ongoing investigation and the counter investigations possibly in other locations, are you looking at any of your other unsolved homicides to see if he could be responsible or involved in any of those?
I can tell you, in my time in the homicide unit, we don't have anything that resembles this. We will be doing a further look at our cold cases to do that, and I'm hoping that with this broadcast that this gets out nationally and potentially internationally. I don't know if he has any international ties, but like the initial story did, and that if there are any investigations ongoing in other jurisdictions, that they will reach out to us.
In your conversations with him, is there anything that he said that would lead you to believe that there may be more cases out there than these 4, 5?
No, he didn't give us any details in reference to anything further, but I can tell you that we have been reached out to by other jurisdictions already this morning in reference to potential ties.
We have
Yes,
time
ma'am.
for one more question.
What can you tell us about him at all? What about his past? Anything? Doesn't seem to have an extensive criminal history. What could have led to a heinous crime like this?
I really couldn't even go into the psyche of somebody that is able to do this, ma'am. I agree with you. He does not have an extensive criminal history, does not have an extensively violent criminal history. But he did not give us any details that would be able to ascertain why somebody would do something like this.
Is he a loner, or has he had a past occupation that you know of?
He has a current occupation. He's an electrician's apprentice.
Scott, last question.
I'd just like to follow up on Jason's question, and Chief, please feel free to weigh in on this. I'm just curious about the situation last week when it happened on Wednesday, and you didn't reveal any details at all until Friday afternoon on such a pretty big crime that the community should be aware of. How do you weigh the community's right to know in a timely fashion when a crime like this happens? And as a homicide sergeant, when you'd like all the time in the world, I'm sure, to investigate without the burden of all the news stories on an hourly basis.
Well, don't ever think that a news story about any homicide investigation is a burden. I just think that we had a certain path that we were going to go through before we felt it necessary to release any kind of information.
But say there have been 10 bodies in that dumpster, or 20 bodies. I mean, at some point there's an urgent need for the community to know, and 3 is getting up there on the number of victims.
I understand what you're saying, and on a case-by-case basis, we will weigh that. But in this instance, we felt that it would be our time would be better served to investigate the crime rather than report on it.
Do you mind if I take a real quick thing?
Absolutely.
Scott, just a little further. One thing we try to do, and we talked about this earlier for the homicide unit. I'm not the expert in homicide investigations. They are. We try to give them the tool and the resources and the space they need to get the job done. And that's exactly what they did, Scott. They got the job done. The safety of the citizens of Fort Worth is priority number 1. And part of that is getting a violent predator like this off the street. And it was my decision to let the homicide unit work this case the way they felt was best. So anyone who questions that decision, that lies with me. They did the job the right way. They got it done without incident, and I could not be more proud of them.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks, everyone. Please remember, I have copies of the search warrant. Thank you.